You are currently at the Environmental Challenges, Water Infrastructure, and Investments to Help Manage Growth. So, as we all know, we're here on Long Island, which is this long, narrow island with over 1,000 miles of coast, not counting inland bodies of water and rivers, and we also get all of our drinking water from a sole source aquifer. So we're surrounded by water in one way or another, whether we like it or not. And I think a lot of people...
But we like it.
No, we do like it. But I think a lot of people take for granted that they could just go in their house, turn on their faucet, and have clean, potable water provided for them. And they don't think about all of the issues that we have to deal with in order to get that water to us and continue to in the future. So I know it's been in the news lately, especially because the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection just issued a report that has about 143 safeguards for protecting our drinking water supply. And also we're going to hear some updates from the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan, which is dealing more with our surface waters. And the panelists here are very wide-ranging for everything dealing with all of the water issues that we have here on Long Island. I really don't want to take any time from them. We will have time at the end for questions. If you can, please hold till the end just to ensure that we get all of the great information to you guys. We're going to start with David Berg, who is from the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan, and he's going to give us a quick overview and an update for what's happening with that. So, David?
I'm just going to stand here. I have no PowerPoint, so you just have to look at this not-so-pretty face for hopefully 7 to 10 minutes. No, I'm good. You can hear me in the back? So I'm going to talk about the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan. We're in our second year. It's a state-funded program with about $5 million in initial funding. It's a partnership between the DEC and the Long Island Regional Planning Council, who I work for, and both counties, as well as a number of other partners, institutional partners and municipal partners. And the goal is to deal with nitrogen pollution. So nitrogen pollution from wastewater, fertilizer, stormwater. There's very little we can do about atmospheric deposition. In the past year, a number of models have been developed. A lot of data has been collected, with the goal of finding out where the priority areas are for nitrogen pollution that enters our groundwater, which, as we all know, travels at different rates of speed to surface water, and all that nitrogen leads to fish kills, algal blooms, and general water quality deterioration. So the goal here is to find ways to reduce nitrogen loads. So you've been hearing a lot about Suffolk County's initiatives. I'm just going to touch on a few of those. Suffolk County, of course, prepared a large comprehensive watershed plan for the entire county. They passed a number of new health department regulations. Article 19, which permitted the use of new innovative, what they're calling innovative and alternative on-site systems to replace cesspools and septic systems. These are basically miniature wastewater treatment plants, but they're very effective at reducing nitrogen. They have a number of manufacturers already approved for those systems, and an exciting program for grants for property owners that want to install them. $10,000 towards a system that may cost upwards of $17,000 to $20,000, and then low interest financing for the balance of that. They have a number of people already signed up for that, and the county's identified priority areas, which, not surprisingly, are either near drinking water supply wells or near the coastline. So those are the priority areas, because that's where the nitrogen gets to our surface waters fastest. They also, their Articles 5 and 6 of the Sanitary Code deal with on-site systems, and this is where some of the more major changes are in place. And so these new innovative alternative systems are required for all new construction in Suffolk County. And on property transfer, they're required to replace cesspools and septic systems in the priority areas. A number of other programs, also sewering. Suffolk County, and I'm going to defer to Mike for Nassau County, but Suffolk County has about $400 million right now for new sewering, primarily on the South Shore, but also In places like Kings Park and Smithtown, there's additional funding through the state for new central sewer systems. There's also a state program we're working closely with, two programs, the harmful algal blooms. So you've probably been seeing in Newsday, certainly in the past year, a lot of information about harmful algal blooms on both north and south shores of the island. Very devastating to marine life, and also in some cases even harmful for human health. There's also, the governor announced a shellfish initiative, and you probably can't see my oyster here, but I am wearing an oyster fin. Big fan of shellfish. So there's a new initiative to really strengthen the shellfish industry with the goal, if we have enough shellfish, they can consume the algae and reduce the frequency and intensity of those algal blooms. Suffolk County is also looking at changing the way they manage and finance wastewater, and they're looking at, they've already been designated as the responsible management entity, which is a legal term for who gets to manage all these systems, and also will be exploring a single district, meaning all of Suffolk County could conceivably be a single wastewater district, which means that the county or some entity would manage all systems, whether they're on-site or centralized. That's something to come. I am going to defer to Mike for Nassau County. Nassau County's doing a lot of the upgrades. You'll hear to their Bay Park plant, and you'll hear about ocean disposal. Right, Mike? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, there we go. A lot of notes here. The USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, is doing a study of the entire Long Island aquifer. Is our aquifer in good health in terms of sustainability? Is there enough water there to keep us supplied with drinking water for the foreseeable future? And the answer is probably overall yes, but in some areas no. We have saltwater intrusion, irrigation use is a big problem on Long Island. Something like 30% of water use is for irrigation, at least in the summer months. So they're looking at, USGS is doing that giant model that's going to be very useful for the aquifer management and also for LINAP. You've got the Center for Clean Water Technologies in Stony Brook. This is an institute funded with state and private money to the tune of several $1 million to look at new wastewater technology and see if there's something we can do better for how we treat wastewater, particularly on single-family residences. And then we have a number of work groups through LINAP that are looking at related issues. Fertilizer is, of course, an obvious place where we bring nitrogen into both counties, and it does have a tendency to end up in our groundwater and then in our surface water. So how can we better manage, or even better reduce use of fertilizer on Long Island? So we have a group that's looking at that. We expect some thoughts to come out on that fairly soon. And I am getting back to the oyster here. There's a group, bioextraction, which is the use of biologicals like seaweed or shellfish to remove nitrogen from surface water. So this deals with legacy nitrogen. So shellfish, obviously, they're consuming algae, which require nitrogen to grow. So you've got a lot of shellfish, you can remove the nitrogen from surface water. So we're looking at expanding the use of shellfish aquaculture for the purpose of removing nitrogen, and also looking at the possibility of a seaweed industry, primarily in the winter, also to directly remove nitrogen. So this could be an interesting new private industry or private and municipal partnership. And then one last thing, and I will turn it back. Again, with legacy nitrogen, so we have nitrogen in our groundwater that came from many decades of land uses, whether it was farming or on-site system, the way cesspools discharging into the ground. The groundwater travels anywhere from 0 to 50 or even 100 years before it gets to the bays and harbors of the north and south shores. So how do we deal with that legacy nitrogen? A couple of different ways. One way is to look at injection technology, where it's basically a plume of nitrogen. Can we stimulate growth of bacteria to get rid of the nitrogen? And also barriers along the shorelines where nitrogen is flowing in the groundwater to the surface waters. permeable reactive barriers are another technology that we're looking at. So that's also something that's coming. And I think, oh, and one very important thing from my friend Heather here and others is the value of citizen science in collecting water quality data. We have a number of groups on the north and south shores of both counties that either have been collecting water quality data, in some cases for several decades, in other cases new groups that are, in the past few years, a great interest in collecting water quality data and seeing just how healthy our bays are. And then importantly, as the LINAP project moves forward, we'd like to believe that we're going to see improvements, but the only way we're going to know that is if somebody's out there collecting the information. So LINAP hopes to be working closely with citizen science groups and other nonprofits to stimulate more interest in citizen science in conjunction with universities. I think I've covered everybody.
Thank you.
So Chris, water reuse. We're going to hear from Chris. Water reuse is another big thing. We have a workshop looking at, we got a lot of wastewater discharge. Is there some way to reuse that wastewater to preserve our aquifers and also to remove more nitrogen? Now I've covered it all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, next year from Adrienne Esposito with the Citizens Campaign. She has a PowerPoint presentation. Do you need the mic, Adrienne?
I doubt it. Just saying. Okay,
Which one
so
is yours? I don't know which one's yours.
Third one down, presentation.
presentation Vision Long Island with our little tiny logo.
Yep.
Okay, actually, Dave was kind enough to cover all my topics, but fortuitously, 33 years in the business, I got other things to talk about as well. Well, the first thing I want to say is that, the title of today's workshop is Water Infrastructure and how that impacts, economic growth on Long Island. And what we've learned very, very much over the last 10 years is that water is a limiting factor. I know I shouldn't say that. I know that that's a controversial statement, but damn, it's true. So we have water quality and water quantity challenges that we need to face and we need to actually identify as we move forward into this new millennium. One of the greatest challenges, but not the only one, is the issue of nitrogen. And, whoops, I got a dong whenever I say that. You've heard it before, you'll hear it again, but nitrogen from improperly treated sewage, it's not just nitrogen, it's nitrogen from improperly treated sewage. Nitrogen also is an indicator contaminant. With nitrogen, it means usually, many, many times the science is showing us that there are volatile organic chemicals in there, that there are some, many times, pharmaceutical drugs, trace amounts, but yet they are there. Other products, other chemicals from, personal care products, you name it. Sometimes it's pesticides as well. So it's not just nitrogen, it's the suite of chemicals that it is also an indicator for. But nitrogen on its own, as you know, is also a contaminant. You can see here in Suffolk County, between 1978 and the year 2000, there was an average increase of 200% in nitrogen pollution in groundwater. That's a very big percent. Those dates actually, and that's from 2005, as you all know, it's 2007, almost 2018. God bless you, it makes you sick. We have 13 more years of data that we're going to need to look at and assess to see how that is changing. We don't believe it's decreasing, we believe it's increasing. Next one. As David explained, we now, because of nitrate contamination, we have a rainbow of toxic tides. We have red tide, we have rust tide, we have mahogany tide, we have brown tide, we have blue-green algae, we got it all. It's a claim to fame we don't want. Anybody know which is the most deadly toxic tide that we find on Long Island? You should know. It's red tide. Why? I'll tell you. Because red tide is what we call a saxotoxin, which means if it builds up in shellfish and you eat those shellfish, it causes paralysis or death. That's pretty serious. It's an ailment you don't come back from. And this is not a theory. In fact, 3 years ago in Alaska, 7 people died from eating shellfish tainted with red tide, the same exact strain, the same exact saxotoxin that we're finding throughout harbors and bays across Long Island. Rust tide doesn't kill humans, but it kills fish. Brown tide doesn't kill humans or fish, but it turns the water that chocolate coffee color, and fish can no longer then find their prey. It's very hard to live when you can't eat and you're swimming around in circles. Not that I know what that's like, but I'm just imagining it. Blue-green algae in fresh water attacks the liver. And we have incidences right here on Long Island of a dog dying after it went into the lake that had the blue-green algae bloom. Unfortunately, the blue-green algae blooms from nitrogen have also appeared in such places upstate as the Finger Lakes, Skinny Atlas, which is an unfiltered drinking water area, very alarming, and also in a backup drinking water reservoir for Albany. So this is becoming even a bigger issue. But nitrogen from untreated sewage causes these kinds of environmental and public health threats. Next one. Wanted to mention to you the year didn't look good. I don't know if you've seen this map yet. This is the summation map of how we did on Long Island with toxic tides. As you can see, it's very colorful. Colorful's not good. Okay, in this case, the less colorful would have been nice. But you can see from Long Beach, I'm not saying that because Long Beach is in the room, but I'm just pointing out Long Beach. We have hypoxia in the embayments here on the North Shore, but we have rust tide, we have red tide, we have blue-green algae blooms. You know, you can see the brown tide. And unfortunately, this summer, the brown tide bloom was the most extensive and occurred for the longest duration of time and was the densest? Yes, in the history of Long Island on the South Shore. That's not good news. Some areas will be sewing, and we need that. I know some people get nervous when they say, oh my God, we're going to sewer. Where there's sewers, there's development. Okay, Mastic and Shirley, there's already development. We're not going to get our way out of water pollution in areas like Mastic and Shirley, which is so densely developed through the new cesspool systems. That's not going to do it. We need we need sewage treatment plants, and we need that kind of wastewater treatment infrastructure. Next one. Same as Bergen Point is being expanded. That's a good thing. There are areas north of that area, like in North Babylon and whatnot. I go to a lot of meetings, a lot. But when I go to the meetings dealing with Bergen Point, people come and are like, please give me sewers. Why? Because they have rising water tables in North Babylon. They're pumping out septic systems 2-3 times per year. That's pretty damn costly. And it's also a very inconvenient way to live. Anybody here have a septic at their home? Yep. And the last thing, if you're pumping it out 3 times a year, that means you've had overflows. Basement, bathroom, bowl, whatever. It's gross. Okay, next one. This year's budget included $20 million for Kings Park to get sewers. This is a state budget, that's a good thing. Bergen Point received a couple years ago $13.6 million to, next one, to upgrade their plant. So we are getting state funding for this, which is great. This is, you probably know this, but 74% of Suffolk is unsewed. So that's 3,600 homes, but a lot of times people forget to tell you there's another 100,000 businesses in Suffolk that also don't have sewers. There's a lot of unsewed areas in Suffolk. But Nassau, you're not exempt from this problem over there. I'm looking at you two. Because in Nassau County, we still have 37,000 parcels that have septics. And in Nassau, we're counting on our new leadership that just is going to be popping in. And oh, look, there's Josh right now, a new Nassau County legislator. But we need Nassau County to do a number of things. This is me lobbying. How am I doing? Am I doing good? Okay. We need Nassau County to adopt what Suffolk County has done. Suffolk County has approved these new innovative systems that actually remove nitrogen from sewage. It's a radical idea. I know that we should actually treat our sewage before we make it mix with the drinking water. It's like we're in the millennium or something. So we have Suffolk, which has approved, hopefully by the end of the year, it'll be 12 systems. Nassau hasn't approved any. We need for Nassau to just approve what Suffolk has approved. It's the same hydrogeological situation. We think that that would be reasonable and rational. And we also need Nassau County to get with it and put together a grants program like Suffolk did, even if they don't want to put any money into it. Some of us worked really, really hard in the state legislature to get them to approve $75 million of state funds that will go to counties, only to counties, that have grant programs to replace old failing septics and cesspools with the new innovative systems. So it'd be great if Nassau did that, and we'll be working with Nassau County to do that starting in January. We can skip this. Okay. Just wanted you to know that, Suffolk has the program, but Dave already covered that. But I also want to leave you with this. It's not just nitrogen. Many of you know we have other drinking water quality challenges. 1,4-dioxane, PFOAs, PFCs. You probably saw today's Newsday where the Suffolk County Water Authority is bringing a suit against the manufacturers of 1,4-dioxane and PFCs. That's a good thing, but it's going to take a long time. We don't have that time. We have contamination today. These are contaminants that do not have a drinking water standard set by the federal government. These are contaminants that are not mandated to be tested for, and they're in our water. We're coming out with a new report on Tuesday about the PFCs, so stay tuned for that. So all of this is to say we have challenges, and we have to meet those challenges because clean water is a necessity. It's not a luxury item. And and sometimes people said, well, that takes money. All right, it takes money. And it takes political will. But clean water, we don't think it's a yes or no option. There's only one option, and that is to pursue it. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Michael Martino from United Water. Suez, please tell us a little bit about what's going on in Nassau County.
So, truly, between you guys, I have almost nothing to talk about, so we can just maybe
No,
go
that's
around the
not
room,
true.
go around the room and, tell each other. Actually, well, first of all, it's Suez. If you see Eric Alexander today, tell him I'm not paying for my sponsorship again this year. Because he continues using the wrong company name. I'm going to talk to you about something really sexy,
Whoa.
and that's sewage. Try and piggyback on everyone. All right, we're Suez. We're a global firm, but locally here. Does anyone know about the Suez United Water deal by raise of hands? Because I know I've told the story a million times. Do you know it? No? Okay. So,
Once upon a time.
going into our 4th year of a public-private partnership with Nassau County to run, to operate and manage the wastewater system. That includes 2 of the 3 treatment plants. We'll take over the 3rd in 2020. There's still under contract with another company. We run the Bay Park plant and the Cedar Creek plant. The thousands of miles of collection system and a couple hundred pump and lift stations. So it's a vast, vast system. Both plants do an average of about 50 million gallons a day treated. So just think about that, 50 million gallons per day, raw sewage coming into the plant and being treated. Bay Park, which I'll circle back to, of course, Bay Park discharges into Reynolds Channel, which is a bay, part of the back bays of the western bays. It's on the north shore of Long Beach. South of the Island Park area, and years ago, 50, 60 years ago, when they built the plant, they thought, well, this is great. You've got East Rockaway Inlet to the west, Jones Inlet to the east. All this water is going to be moving through, and Reynolds Channel does move a lot of water. It's just going to flush everything out. Well, It didn't work out that way, and it just sat, and it sits. And it has now choked those bays. The EPA has deemed them impaired bodies of water. Adrian, among other people, are loud voices to try and restore. I didn't mean that, but I totally meant that. A loud and not unignorable voice is Adrian, because the squeaky wheel does get the grease. So those areas are I don't want to say dead, because they're not dead.
Dying.
They're dying. And yet there's signs of life. There's signs of life, so there is hope. Cedar Creek dumps out to the ocean, okay? 3.5 miles or so south of Jones Beach. Again, about 50 million gallons per day. Now, I really am not authorized completely to talk about the plan because I work for the county and it's a county project. So if anyone asks, I didn't say a word. This is all, I've never said off the record to this many people at one time, but it's off the record. The project that the county is looking into is to to take Bay Park sewage treatment plant, and instead of sending the effluent, the treated effluent, into Reynolds Channel, it would actually send it north. It would send it north to Sunrise Highway, and it would connect actually to an aqueduct that has existed there, a 72-inch pipe that's been there for about 100 years, when Brooklyn Waterworks used to take more money, and water off of Long Island. And there was only an operation for a short amount of time before they realized they could bring water from upstate, and they shut it off. That pipe has remained there that whole time. The county did a study. The pipe is in remarkably good shape. They do not build them like they used to. It's an absolutely correct adage. It was in virtually pristine condition. And so the project will be, hopefully, to send that effluent up to that pipe, send it east, and then send it south to connect to the ocean outfall, and it would go out where the current outfall is. Suez operates the plant. So anything the county does is going to impact us tremendously, okay? We work hand in hand with different projects, capital projects. Now, Bay Park, I won't go through the whole Sandy thing. We all know Sandy destroyed everything. It also shut down Bay Park for 42 hours. And no longer do you have to worry about or wonder about what the worst case scenario is. We lived it. The plant was down. There were geysers of raw sewage. It was just adding insult to injury to so many people whose homes were already flooded. And then there were geysers of sewage, raw sewage this high, coming out of their toilets, their sinks, through their lawns. Their side laterals blew out, streets broke open. So we don't have to say, gee, I wonder what would happen. We know. So now there's no excuse to make sure that doesn't happen. $800 million was secured by the administration, the McGowan administration, to pump into Bay Park and rebuild it. It's FEMA dollars mostly, and they're doing an incredible job raising power sources and whatnot, and it's incredible. So I guess we're talking about water quality, so I can actually touch on a couple things, bless you. So water reuse, we're actually looking at a water reuse program right now. Now again, it's an odd situation in that the county pays for capital projects by the contract. So we identify them, and a lot of them are just, hey, a pipe broke in the street, we have to go fix it, and we're gonna get paid for it. But then there are other projects that we're looking to implement ourselves. One of them, which is actually a water reuse program, and I won't steal the thunder, because I'm sure it's the same thing, but I can tell you this, it would decrease the use of potable water at one of the plants. We will do both plants at some point, but Bay Park is so overrun with construction right now, post-Sandy construction, it'd be tough to sort of shoehorn a project like this in. But we would save around 300 million gallons of fresh water out of the aquifer every year. We want to do this, right? Because and here's the thing, it really isn't like it really shouldn't be groundbreaking, right? And in fact, a lot of this shouldn't be. I don't like state of the art, but I don't feel like coming up with nothing, so it's not state of the art, cutting edge. It's really just kind of logical, right? This should have been done a long time ago. I mean, we treat wastewater, and then we use fresh water to run the plant. I mean, it really makes no sense. At 50 million gallons per day, you have to think you can use some of that water, right? Yeah. This gentleman, though, will tell you all about that, so I won't steal the thunder again. We're looking at a biomethane program to take more methane and clean it better so we can run the plant in different ways. All of this takes a lot of money, right? It all takes a lot of money and, as Adrian said, political will. Tremendous amount of political will. Now this agreement actually did take a lot of political will. It was not an easy deal. There was a lot of work with the communities, with the environmentalists, and of course with the government to ensure that the residents would, well, get their money's worth. But now we're at a point though where I feel like we're kind of like at a change, right? Look, I see it. I think this is like monumental change going on right now politically, okay? We see a new county executive in Nassau. We see a Democrat running the town of Hempstead. Like this is groundbreaking stuff, like earth-shattering things. And I don't know that it changes a situation in the Bay, but what it does say is maybe people are starting to think a little differently, right? I don't know if we need any more studies. How many more studies do you need? How much data can you collect? It's just, we're looking at obvious things. When you see a picture of a fish kill, and there's, you know, the hundreds of thousands of bunker floating in a marina dead, well, something did that, right? I mean, it's not always natural. Or red tide. I love to eat clams, shellfish, and oysters. I'm not looking to die on it, so, you know.
You're not dying for them.
No. So, I mean, I'll sum it up here because there's more to say with everyone else. As a private company, everyone will shake the finger and say, you're only in it for the profit. Yeah, man, we are. We're looking for some money. And by the way, I worked for the county before I walked over here, so I've seen a good amount of stuff. And we do. We make money. But how do we make money? And this is where it separates us from government a little bit. We need to be more efficient. We need to look at every penny. We need to look at every process to see what we're doing to ensure that we are, as perfection doesn't exist, but kind of what we strive for is pretty much perfection. The regulatory bodies actually pay even a little more attention to a private company. We're an easy target. And the bottom line is, while we're making money though, our focus is one thing, and that's the environment. And what we're doing so far has had an impact. We meet with an environmental coalition every quarter. We share our results. The plants are running incredibly well. The effluent is cleaner than it has ever been. Odors and noise are down. These are things that quality of life, economic, everything, you know, that comes into it. And I think the overarching thing I'm going to sum up to is it's only working because it is a partnership. Okay, it's only working because municipalities are they don't have the money. They can't manage in many ways. No one wanted to raise taxes 20 years ago. Everyone was afraid to do it. Plants fall into disrepair because there's no more money. Everyone cries, oh, I don't want to spend another $20 a year. You know, you pay for water to be delivered and to be treated and to be managed. You don't pay for the water. And you don't pay to flush your toilet, but you want to make sure that when it comes out, that you can still swim and fish and whatever. And it's taking a partnership to do that. Transparency and a lot of talk. So while everyone is, you know, you're all listening to all these different things, I think everyone maybe, if there's one thing we can all agree on besides nitrogen pollution, is the fact that if we're not all working together, with Adrian leading the way maybe, if we're not all working together, we're never going to fit. We could be the best company in the world, but those bays will never come back to life unless we give Mother Nature a chance to fix it. So, diatribe done.
We keep hearing everybody say reuse, but I'll leave it to Chris. Reuse, I'll leave it to Chris. So now we're gonna go to Chris to let us know about some very exciting reuse projects here on Long Island.
That's a great lead in.
Here, right there. I may have closed that. There you go. Yeah. Yep.
Well, I was going to say good morning, but instead I'm going to say good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you want the mic?
No, I'll speak up. That was a great lead-in to everything that I wanted to talk about. Thank you very much for that. I'm here as part of this panel to kind of whet your appetite, so to speak, on the benefits and possibilities of water resource recovery using treated wastewater. Instead of discharging that wastewater into your coastal waters, your water bodies, and your rivers and streams. So that is something that I would like, I feel very strongly about. We're going to talk about a project that we have brought to fruition. It took us 15 years to bring this to fruition. And that's because it's a new idea for this region, not a new idea to the country. But since it's a new idea to this region, just like everything else, sometimes it takes a little while for it to come forward, but its time is now. As far as
Time has come.
wastewater reuse, for infrastructure growth, it's kind of directly related to the creating sustainable and protected environments, as well as sustainable and protected recreational and drinking water resources. So you really have to tie those two together to really understand everything. Thank you. The proven example of this is the Riverhead's Water Resource Recovery Facility. This facility is the most advanced wastewater treatment plant in New York State, and it's right here in Suffolk County, Long Island. The facility, as always and still, discharges to the Peconic Estuary, and it produces the lowest nitrogen levels that technology can get down to for wastewater treatment. The only thing lower really is drinking water standards at this point. That overall impact alone was enough to greatly influence the improvements in the sustainability of the Peconic Estuary and protect that source for Riverhead's growth potential for decades to come. Just that improvement alone. But the goals of this facility far reached way past that. They didn't want to just worry about reducing nitrogen. They wanted to go to that next step. So Riverhead became basically the only wastewater treatment facility in New York State that was built to reuse treated wastewater for irrigation on public land. Okay? They happen to be located right next door to the Indian Island Golf Course out in Riverhead. To their benefit, to the county's benefit, and the aquifer's benefit, therefore everybody's benefit, they are giving the water to Indian Island at no cost, and just pumping it into their system that they use for irrigation to irrigate the golf course during the entire irrigation season, which runs anywhere from basically April, May, and they always shut it down sometime in November. It's important to really understand that the wastewater was an additional benefit that was put together way beyond just reducing the nitrogen loading as low as they got. This was a choice made by Riverhead, like I said, like 15 years ago, to meet the current nitrogen loading regulations, but to take it way, way past that. There were no regulations requiring them to do this, and there was no water shortage. We've never had anybody screaming about water shortage or water conservation in our past. It was a very far-reaching, very environmental thing to do, which they jumped right into. Now, because at the time there were no wastewater reuse standards in New York State, especially for public land irrigation, we had to work with Riverhead to actually set the standards. So working with the state and the county regulators, all the way down to all the local civic groups that were more than welcome to help us figure out the best answers to these questions, we developed the standards. We proved out that the standards were achievable and safe for the public and the environment. This was done initially with the construction of a small pilot plant, which was built right on the Riverhead facility. And we used that pilot plant to basically determine the best possible equipment applications to achieve the standards and demonstrate all those results. What you see in that photo there is some sample equipment, some holding tanks, and an actual replica golf hole that was built on the treatment plant property. Made, just like the guys across the street, they came over and kind of built a golf hole for us, and we irrigated it with the water from the plant, from the system, with the exact same irrigation equipment they used, just to make sure that it was safe, it was operable, and there was actually no detriment to the environment, the air, or the people that maintained it, because the grounds crew actually came over and maintained this golf hole also.
That's kind of funny.
It was right, they came right through the fence. I can't tell you if anybody actually shot any golf balls on that golf hole. The end result of this whole endeavor was a fully upgraded facility that integrated all the reuse treatment necessary equipment in with all the nitrogen removal equipment. From this system, a 1.5 MGD facility, we send 450,000 gallons a day to the golf course for irrigation. On top of that, we are sending 100,000 gallons a day back to the treatment plant to basically apply for all the wash water and all the on-site water stuff. So you're looking at 550,000 gallons a day that used to be either groundwater wells or potable water connections that no longer has to come out of the aquifer. So it's just doubling down on the nitrogen removal, and now you're talking water conservation. It's just such a home run. So as we add it up, I know Mike mentioned.
Or a hole in one.
Or a hole
It's
in
a hole in one. Sorry.
As Mike mentioned, 300 million gallons. Well, at Riverhead, based on the flows we're looking at, we're saving 100 million gallons a year of water pumped out of the aquifer. That doesn't have to be done that way anymore. To kind of equate that a little bit, to put it in everybody's head, that amount of water is equal to the daily drinking water use of 900 single-family homes every day. So that's what's being saved just by sending that reuse water back. Additionally to that, there's 30% of the nitrogen that would normally be going to the Peconic Estuary, because that's where the discharge goes, is being sent back to the golf course, and it's being spread across the landscaping and the grasses, feeding their sources, and any extra water that's going out of the irrigation is filtering itself back down to the groundwater table. So we're kind of recycling it back that way, getting more use out of it. It works out phenomenally. The success of this application, it really has become realized as a resource and environmental benefit. But again, it's still just the beginning. Because now that the standards have been set, proven out, demonstrated, and I have to admit, the surrounding public has welcomed this system ecstatically. It's been very well received. It's really our feeling that almost any advanced wastewater treatment plant out there right now could easily be turned into a water resource recovery facility without much trouble. It's economically feasible, it's definitely scalable, and it's definitely repeatable, because the technology is not black box magic technology. It's technology we've had around for a long time. We just needed to implement it in the proper ways. Reuse water applications that we're looking at, because not every plant is next to a golf course, so we're not always that lucky, but there's a lot of other opportunities for there. I know Bay Park is near a golf course, if I remember right, so that's a great opportunity there. Direct groundwater recharge is another way of doing it. Wetlands and habitat restoration, another great way to send reuse quality water back. Industrial and commercial process water use, great opportunity. They use a lot of water. You can start looking at opportunities to send water back for their processed waters. Just like we do it in the plant, they can do it commercially or industrially. Saltwater intrusion barriers, protecting our groundwater table, putting in barriers that stop the salt water from working its way back to the groundwater. And other things we're looking at that we've been talking with the DEC about is farming irrigation, in order, not just landscaping irrigation, but the potential of farming irrigation. So in the end, basically what we're looking at is when you choose, the way we want everybody to think is when you choose to reuse wastewater, it really provides an investment that pays you back. It pays you back in environmental protection and stability. and it aids in managing the area's growth in your water resources in many, many ways. So with that, I think that'll.
Next up, we have Heather Johnson from Friends of the Bay.
Hello, everybody. I just mentioned the new executive director of Friends of the Bay as of, October 10th, 2017. And don't want to be guilty of keeping you from your lunch, so I'll keep it relatively brief. First, I'm curious as to how many people are familiar with Friends of the Bay. Okay. For those of you who are not familiar, it was formed in 1987, and like other civic-minded nonprofit groups, it was formed in response to something that was happening in the community about which the citizens were concerned. And in this case, this was proposed development of a Jacobson shipyard, which was a contaminated site. And this would have included about 75 condos, a 225 slip marina with a wave baffle, a restaurant atop a 3-story office building. In other words, it would have been very, very damaging. And so Friends of the Bay was successful in getting that to not happen. But the mission of Friends of the Bay is to protect, preserve, and restore the ecological integrity of the Oyster Bay, Cold Spring Harbor estuary and the surrounding watershed. So among the things that we do is we help maintain clean waters, we monitor water quality, which is one of the reasons why we're here today to talk about that. We raise awareness on the importance of preserving water quality and marine life, which I think we've all, covered that pretty well, and it is a no-brainer, of course. Confront unsound development proposals, promote responsible development, partner with residents, organizations, and local business, and try really hard to work with government at all levels. So this is the area that we cover. This is our action map, and sorry if it looks a little blurry, but you can see we actually cover 14 sites as a little typo later on. Millneck Creek, Oyster Bay Harbor, and Cold Spring Harbor. And unfortunately, you can't really see this very well, but this shows you where we are going. If you go into the next one, just wanted to give you an idea of where we are. So the monitoring program, again, screens for water quality impairments. Because we've been doing this for a couple of decades, you can also determine long-term water quality trends, see how these water quality improvement programs are actually working, and trying to educate the public and officials about water quality protection. We also serve as watchdogs for the watershed and for harbor activity. So the monitoring program, we collect water samples at 14, not 11, that's a typo, sites throughout the Oyster Bay, Cold Spring Harbor estuary, and we actually also do streams and outfalls testing at 11 sites. We use a Quanta HydroLab water quality monitoring system. We also use a SecuDisc. There's a few different items that we use for that. And we're testing for coliform bacteria and also for dissolved oxygen. And as you can see, the different reasons for coliform and high coliform bacteria is stormwater runoff, animal crap, for lack of putting it in a better way, failing septic systems, and pumping of boat heads directly into water, which unbelievably people still do things like that. And obviously high levels could cause closure of shellfish beds and swimming areas, so we never want to see that. Dissolved oxygen, the other form is the thing that we're testing for, obviously animals, marine animals, and plant life need oxygen. The factors that influence this hypoxia, which is oxygen deficiency, is temperature. It's more stressful in the warmer weather for marine life. Cooler temperature is better for them. The higher the saline water, the higher their salt concentration, the lower DO capacity of water, excessive nutrients, which was talked about before, the algal blooms, and poor water quality. So one of the reasons we're here today also is to talk about what the challenges are. So of course, with any small nonprofit, but certainly it is the case with Friends of the Bay, there are three major ones. The first one being funding, because there are a lot of costs. And again, with any small nonprofit, you have a funding issue. But we have, and I did not even list everything. We have the boat, we have gas, we have equipment. We are lucky that the Nassau County Department of Health does pay for the testing that's done. And by the way, I failed to mention that we do this from April to October. And we also have participated this past year and plan to continue the unified water sampling with Long Island Sound Study. So that brings me to my next little problem, which is personnel. We have a really small group of volunteers, and I'd say right now we actually have 3 volunteers who go out. This intrepid crew go out again from April to October every Monday, and they are characters, I will tell you that, because I've gone out with them before. But there's the captain of the boat, there's the one who handles the equipment, and the one who enters the data. So you have to have at least 3 people, and people who know what they're doing, and know and who care to do what they're doing. So that's always a challenge. And then of course weather. Our boat, which has served us well, but has definitely seen better days. It has a minor hole in it. It does not have any shelter. Yes, it's not like sinking, obviously, but
It's a small leak.
Minor hole in boat is a major hole.
well, this is a fundraising objective for next year, obviously, to get ourselves a new boat, because not only do we need it obviously for for the volunteers, but we're hoping to bring people out on the bay, because well, if you get to the next picture, because of this. And this picture, the reason why I put this up here, I took this picture. This is before I was even the executive director. I went out and helped Paul D'Orsay, my predecessor, with unified water sampling, and this was taken at 6:15 in the morning. And if anybody who knows me knows that I don't like getting up at 6:15 in the morning. However, I mean, this is just so beautiful, and we have to work to protect it. And I'm just one of many, or the Friends of the Bay is one of many groups who are out there in their, again, intrepid way, doing water sampling. So I'm really just thrilled that you're here and that you care enough to be here, and I'm thrilled to have, sitting on a panel with such experts, and let's just keep up the good work.
We're going to open up the floor to questions, but I just wanted to say something very quickly. We've heard from everybody here, it comes down to money, it comes down to government support, it comes down to citizen support. I have a piece of information from someone who was unable to attend today. She's with the town of Hempstead Conservation and Waterways, and they have this state-of-the-art lab for water testing and other functions that has not been funded with staff or money for the past 2 years. And that is on the chopping block right now. And something that she brought up to me that I think could help many of us on the table here is possibly having some kind of Long Island consortium of the different citizen groups that come together to do the testing, to find a way, there's power in numbers. Maybe you could come together to get some grant funding or some other funding sources, because this is so important. And I know David Berg may have wanted to say something about that, or if
Yes.
not, never mind.
Absolutely did. Well, I did mention briefly that through the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan, we hope to be working with the citizen science groups and the Governor's Shellfish Initiative. And part of that initiative is to look at existing waterfront facilities like the town of Hempstead's Waterways and Conservation Facility, where they have a shellfish hatchery, where they also have an amazing energy park, which is not our topic today, but it is pretty amazing. And they had an incredible analytical laboratory there. So I think there are great opportunities, particularly in terms of Nassau County and where Nassau County is going, to utilize those public facilities and help us as a large group to monitor water quality. And particularly with the changes that are going to happen in the Western Bays, with what Nassau County is doing, redirecting the sewage out of the Western Bays and into the ocean, presumably will be a large change, and presumably a good one. It would be nice to be able to monitor that, and that's where we're going to rely on on groups like Friends of the Bay, although you're on the North Shore, but equivalent groups on the South Shore to really follow that progress.
Now we're open to questions, and you in the back.
I have two questions, one for Mr. Berg and one for Mr. Martino. Mr. Berg, talking about the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan, how are you building on what's been done for the Long Island Sound Study, the Conneaut Estuary Study, and the Department of State's South Shore Studies? Because they've done a lot of work on reducing nitrogen into those water bodies. And my second question is for Mr. Martino. I'd be interested in hearing what type of reuse projects are you proposing at Cedar Creek and Bay Park? Thank you.
So, yeah, I failed to mention that, and we have a lot of partners in the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan, and certainly the 3 estuary programs that you mentioned, you're right, they've been doing work for a long time. They've collected a lot of information, they have a lot of support from their communities, and they work closely with the municipalities that surround those estuaries. So yes, we're doing work with them. There is support flowing through the LINEP program to the estuary programs. Long Island Sound Study is, of course, supported by the US EPA. I didn't mention, but I talked about bioextraction and the shellfish and seaweed program. Well, as a matter of fact, next week, through a grant from the Long Island Sound Study, we're going to be hiring a bioextraction coordinator, somebody who's going to do the background research to create a seaweed industry and to advance a shellfish aquaculture towards nitrogen removal. So, and the Conneaut Estuary, they have a study looking at groundwater that we supported through the USGS. And the South Shore Estuary Reserve, we talked about Western Bays, we're working with them on that, so yes. Thank you.
The water reuse program is actually very much what Chris described, except not on such a involved scale, only because of location and whatnot, but we would be further treating some of that effluent and then sending it back into the system to use for cooling water and any other industrial uses. Taking 80% of what would be freshwater use, taking that out, leaving that 20% for showers, drinking water, washing, and so on, and using all of that just for the operation of the plant.
More? Mayor?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, again, I'm sorry, because again, remember, it's 50 million gallons a day. So although it's a larger project in scope as far as volume and what we would have to do, the Riverhead project is sort of it's an example to follow. It's something we would like to follow as well.
So, this might be for the whole panel. As you all know, the peninsula of Mastic, Shirley, and Mastic Beach is probably one of the lowest lying wetland communities that's the most densely populated, that has zero sewering or good septic. My question is as we're looking at the new sewer plant, which is only phase 1 going to cover what is really a small area in the peninsula, do you think having multiple solutions like having the alternative systems down in the lower flood zones, which maybe could have a gray water type of facilitation with that, to what do we do with our downtown? We can't wait for that sewer plant to start to redevelop and revitalize our downtown. Do you think something like doing a smaller plant for our 2 main streets to finally maybe work with the coming plants? I mean, I'm looking at it, Michael, perhaps you could tell us, a plant that will be at Calabro Airport. When will something like that actually be able to come down to Mastic Beach? And if the case is 10 years, would it make more sense to do a smaller plant that we could add up and running quicker than 10 years?
Well, I'll hesitate to go too deeply into Suffolk County business. However, is it a question of throwing sort of good money after bad at that point, because you're duplicating efforts? And there are, I don't know the exact number, but probably, dozens, definitely maybe even close to hundreds of little package plants throughout Suffolk County that already exist. See, 178, look at that. And they don't all perform very well at all. So I think it needs to be, and I guess these guys, they might be into it, it needs to be a complete approach, right? And what would you?
Yeah, the best answer to that is, and I understand, it took us 15 years to bring the Riverhead facility forward. It was, that was a tenacious effort, just staying on target. But it pays off. Planning is so much more important especially with the area you're talking about, and I am familiar with that project. Planning that project out and implementing it in a planned approach is definitely going to suit everything down there in a much better way than a quick, smaller plant and then having to decommission or move things around. You'll get the benefits of cost, you'll get the benefits of technology, and you'll get a system that was thought all the way through and can continue to support each phase as it goes. And I would stick more to planning and follow the planning route. I think you'd be better served.
Just a real follow-up on that. When you talk about planning, the reason I mentioned the time is because I'm watching sea level rise happen way faster than anyone's talking about down there. I mean, I'm looking at the water coming up the streets so much more severely than anyone's predicted. And so you talk about planning, and I'm like, yes, but, it seems like the time for planning is almost past at this point.
We have time for one more question. I know we started a little late.
Well, this is a quick comment. My name's Linda with the Kings Park Civic Association, and it's always a plug. We're very interested in bringing water reuse to our area. If anyone is interested in speaking with us, we would love to partner with you guys.
Okay, so then we'll do one more question.
What would it take to make the output of the Riverhead plant portable?
My question too.
Oh, see, we covered 2 for 1.
Well, pretty much. I mean, we're taking it down to just shy of portable reuse. So we're not quite treating it that far. We're disinfecting it, but we're not taking it to a reverse osmosis level. So it's kind of at the level now where if you drag it, you might get sick, but the chances are you still probably wouldn't.
Maybe
But I
You're one treatment level short. Most of the plants, because of what's in the water, since it's already been through its process, you're not pulling out clean water, you're pulling out treated water that still has bacteria that we are negating and blocking. But to take it any further, I would say you'd want to run it through a reverse osmosis system before I would put it through a potable water system.
it takes money and technology.
Is it filtered enough to go through a trickle irrigation system?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Which would necessitate extremely lower pressure than an overhead system like we're using on the golf course.
Yeah, you could definitely do a trickling system. We are looking at some developments that are putting in their smaller plants, and we're looking at, they're putting in small independent trickle irrigation systems into their communities to pull off the treatment plant to
Could
feed.
be pumped to a tower and then gravity fed into an irrigation system.
It's definitely an idea, and then that's where it kind of goes back to the planning that we were talking about, because if you start looking down that path and you look at other communities outside this region, you've got the purple pipe community, basically, where you have a blue pipe, which is your potable water, and a purple pipe. We need to start putting in purple pipe. When I say send it to commercial properties and stuff like that, let's start putting in infrastructure that sends purple pipe water, which is just reuse water that doesn't have to go to that extra level of drinking.
What do you do now in the winter when the golf course is closed?
We still reuse the stuff on site, just like Mike is talking about, but then it goes to the Peconic estuary. The water is treated to the limits of technology all the time. So we just reuse it on the golf course.
Familiar with John Todd systems at the New Alchemy Institute, where it goes to an area where it then flows into plant life before it, in a gradual level, and then flows out to the bay.
Like a wetlands habitat.
Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're interested in. It's another opportunity if you can find that or create that. It's another great way to do it, and that would be usable through the winter.
And you need space.
You need space.
You have a golf course next to the water, you have the space, when it's not being used, to try something like that.
It's a great idea.
Okay, the lunch starts now. So, thank you, everybody. I hope we answered all your questions. If not, please come up to us during the remainder of the day.